Hello, everybody. Pastor Sal here from the Ridge. And as we continue with our series here for our daily devotional, um, based on the book, the uh, devotional life in the Wesleyan tradition, that is the book that we are, workbook that we're using. We are in week 4, day 5 now of this daily devotional. It's a 7-week study. And It's interesting enough. I know that when we first started when we first started this sermon series, or I should say, devotional Bible study series, um, we weren't sure if we were going to be going, 2 weeks or 3 weeks into it, but it looks like as things are progressing, it very likelihood we're going to be doing all 7 weeks. So that's great because it is a very good book, very good workbook. It gives us really good ideas based on the examples of John Wesley and all the recordings and writings, journals that he wrote down, and everything that he used in order for to lead a more devotional life. And so today we're in week 4, day 5. Again, we've been covering this week the Lord's Supper, that it's the food for the journey. Our journey is our devotional life or spirituality to be closer to God. And so that's what we are using this for. Um, and in the Lord's Supper, I know the first day we covered that it is a remembrance. It is a past and the future remembrance, meaning that we partake in that Lord's Supper. Anytime that we're remembering it, we're actually partaking in it. That's what the Hebraic version understanding of remembrance means. And then also it's a sign for our future that will be in the heavenly banquet. Christ is, in day 2, we spoke about how Christ is present at the Lord's Supper. Um, in many different formats and many different ways. Each denomination has their own belief of how Christ partakes in the body and blood that the bread and the wine or the bread and the juice represent, or the wafers and the juice, or whatever it is that you may use. Day 3, we spoke about unworthy reception, about unworthiness, not meaning that unworthy means by the person, but the way that you do communion, that it makes sure that it's not rude or disorderly, that it's taken seriously, and that we all need the body and blood of Christ. So we are all welcome to the table. And then yesterday we spoke about proper preparation in our hearts and how we have to go into the Lord's Supper or the communion with in the sense of repentance, that we want to change, that we want to be sorry for the things that we've done to offend God. And today we're going to be talking about frequency of communion. So today's reading, it says, the rubric for the order of communion in the Book of Common Prayer, which is written in 1662, stated that in cathedral and collegiate churches and colleges where there are many priests and deacons, they shall all receive the communion with the priest every Sunday at the least. Okay, so um, one of the orders of the common in the Book of Prayer, it's the book that the Anglican Church uses. Of course, John Wesley was an Anglican priest in the 1700s, and so he used the Book of Common Prayer as one of his resources. First being the Bible, and then being the Book of Common Prayer. And it talks about that in places where there's churches and colleges, where there's lots of priests and deacons, they should be taking the communion every Sunday at the least. Okay. But by Wesley's day, this instruction was largely ignored, so that most people receive communion only twice a year, others quarterly, and a few monthly. As the frequency of the sacrament declined, so also did its significance in the church and in the lives of its members. So, um, for example, in the United Methodist Church, we only do communion the first Sunday of every month. Is considered Communion Sunday, or if it's another day that we're doing it, another special day or something to that effect, it's considered a day that we do the communion. In the Catholic Church, of course, the Roman Catholic Church, they have it every Sunday at their services, and sometimes they'll have services during the week that provide communion. Um, in different denominations, it's different. So again, but for Wesley, it was very important that the Lord's Supper should be at least taken, a monthly, and so that's one of the things that by Wesley's day, a lot of the things were changing. Uh, so it wasn't the same as doing it every week. It was kind of different during that time. Now, Wesley stood in contrast to this sacrament erosion, and this is what he considered it as, a sacrament erosion. He was crystal clear concerning his position, writing that, quote, "No man can have any pretense to Christian piety who does not receive it," in other words, the Lord's Supper, "not once a month, but as often as he can or she can." He put as often as he can, but of course, he's referring to all men, women, and men. So, no man or woman can have any pretense to Christian piety who does not receive it, the Lord's Supper or communion, not once a month, but as often as he can. And that's what he wrote, end quote. A look at his own diary shows that he averaged taking communion once every 4 or 5 days. He urged frequent communion, rooting such reception in a spirit of constant communion that keeps one's heart perpetually before God. When Methodism became a denomination in North America, he exhorted the clergy to celebrate the Lord's Supper every Sunday. So, end quote. Now, in many of the Methodist churches, what they do is they will have a service. There's a church here on the west side of El Paso that the Methodist church that their first service, their morning service, they have communion every Sunday, and then their other services will have it once a month. The first of the month, the first Sunday of the month. So it just depends on what the congregation wants to do, but John Wesley greatly urged that we should do it every Sunday. So we should partake in it actually, he urged that we should partake in it as many times as you can. Okay, so if you're able to get it every day, do it. Every other day, every 3 days, whatever. His main thing was as many times as you can, because it is important. Uh, it's the Lord's Supper. I mean, I don't know what more you can say to say that it's important. Once again, Wesley's historic perspective presents us with a contemporary challenge. We have to admit that many churches fail to offer frequent communion, much less weekly communion. The failure to do so is sometimes based in reasons Wesley would never condone, such as an anticipated drop in attendance on Sundays when communion is served. What we must keep in mind, regardless of the actual frequency of offering, is that the Lord's Supper is a means of grace. Okay, so the Lord's Supper is a means of grace. In other words, it's how we partake in the great in the mercy, the sacrifice of the body and blood of Christ, so that we would have eternal life. And so that's the eternal grace. That's grace that's given as a gift from God, right? And that's how we partake in it. Um, so it's a means of grace. It's a way of us receiving that grace from God, right? It's important. Really important. I can't stress that enough. As such, we do not want to deprive people of the opportunity to draw near to God in this way. If we need to re-educate ourselves in the meaning of the sacrament to see its value, then let us do so. And that's interesting enough because, well, in the denomination that I participate in, which is the United Methodist Church, we do communion most of the time. It's going to be most of the services is once a month, first Sunday of the month. And we are a denomination that follows the Wesleyan tradition, right? Doing John Wesley's was our founder. It's interesting that we have here this workbook that is taught in the church as being an advanced lay servant class. Okay, so this would be, let's say we were doing it here, um, and if you had already taken the basic course, you take this one as one of the 3 or 4 courses that are offered to do the advanced lay servant. Using this workbook, you would be considered a certified lay servant after taking this class, right? It's interesting that we use it in the church. We are, but yet we don't follow this suggestion that it should be every Sunday. So maybe it is a time for the church to re-educate itself. Maybe it is a time for us to see the value of communion, and maybe that's what we need the most right now with everything that's going on with this COVID and the world and the uncertainty. We need to draw near to God. We need that peace, that we need God's grace to help us and to strengthen us with everything that's going on. And maybe that we need to go back to weekly communion. So, all right, that was my 2 cents. That was uh, my what do you call it? My little rant. So it's over. Okay, so we need to re-educate ourselves the importance of the meaning of the sacrament. Then let us do so. Now, if we must find new and creative ways to make the Lord's Supper available, then let us do so. Some of the churches here in El Paso, what they're doing is they're doing drive-by communion. Okay, so they're going to be doing that. I know our sister church, our mother church, I should say, Western Hills, um, the May the 3rd, they're going to be doing drive-by communion. So they'll consecrate the elements, and then they'll be outside in the parking lot, and people can drive through and receive communion. Uh, and maybe what we need to do is consecrate them over the Zoom or over YouTube, Facebook or whatever. I don't know. I know that's not something that is done in the Methodist Church. It's not approved as online or by uh, you know via live stream to do it. It still has to be an in-person thing. However, right now with everything that's going on, we don't know if we need to redo ways, be more creative, find ways to make it available to people. So that's something that we're going to have to do. Holy Communion is at the heart of devotional life in the Wesleyan tradition. Okay, so it's very, very much important, as it is with prayer, with discipline. Leading a devotional life means that you lead a life that's devoted to Christ, not just devote 5 minutes to go do a couple of verses readings. Or devotional life means everything you do in your life leads to Christ, okay, in some way. And so that's the full devotional life that John Wesley believed we could achieve. We could achieve a Christian holy life, a Christian perfection, but we have to seek it. We have to work at it. It's not just going to come naturally, and we have to do this as a daily thing that we have to do. All right. So the reflective questions for today is: how many times have you received the Lord's Supper in the past year? Okay, so think back. How many times in the last year have you been able to partake or receive the Lord's Supper in the past year? Um, I can probably say that in my case, I know at least in the last 2 years, I would say I've averaged once a month. So I would say I probably have received communion 24 times in the last 2 years. In the last year, it's been 12, minimum of 12. Um, and so it's important for us to remember, how many times have we received the Lord's Supper in the last year? Okay. The second question is: are there any attitudes about the Lord's Supper that you need to relinquish to more meaningfully partake in the sacrament? Okay, are there any attitudes about the Lord's Supper that you need to relinquish to more meaningfully partake of the sacrament? So, what attitudes keeps you? What keeps you from taking it seriously to partake? Remember that it's a sacrament. Okay, it's a sacrament. Uh, it's not a tradition. It's a sacrament we must do. And it's something that it's a commandment from Jesus, because when he says, love your neighbor as yourself, or love your neighbor as I loved you, and he said that that was as equally important as love God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength. That's a commandment. Well, in the same way, he said, do this in remembrance of me. He didn't say, well, if you want to, go ahead and do this, and that way you can remember me. Or he didn't say, do this in remembrance of me if you like it, or if you feel like it. Do this in remembrance of me if you deem yourself worthy. Do this in remembrance of me if you think it's important. Okay, no, he said plainly and simply, do this in remembrance of me. That's how important the Lord's Supper should be. That's how important communion should be. It should be an integral part of our devotional life, our life to Christ. I mean, there's no way that we can live a Christian life without partaking in the communion. I mean, you just can't. If you're a Christian and a follower of Christ, then you believe that his body was broken. You believe that his blood was shed for you on that cross. And you believe what he said on the upper room that night when he said, do this in remembrance of me. This is my body. This is my blood. Um, you can't have the good news. You can't have the gospel without it. Just plain and simple. So communion is the Lord's Supper is very important. It's an integral part of our Christian life and our devotional life. So, all right. So it's very, very important. And then our relating question for today is: think of other aspects of your life where frequency of action enriches the meaning of what you're doing. Have you ever cultivated a love for something by engaging in its regularly? Have you ever cultivated a love for something by engaging in it regularly? So, have you ever had something that you're engaged to it, engaging with it all the time, very regularly, and it's something that's cultivated a love for, right? So, I can't think of any examples right now off the top of my head, but I guess I would say, um, when I used to coach soccer, when I used to coach my son in soccer, or when Stephanie, my oldest, when she was little, and I coached her in basketball, or when Samantha was in her events, and anytime that Steven, Samantha, and Steven, Stephanie, Samantha, and Steven were in anything, I can honestly say that we cultivated a love for it, me and my wife, because me and Yadira participated in it. Yeah, it was work, and yes, it was tiring or whatever, but we cultivated a love for it because we engaged in it regularly. So we there was a love for what we were doing. So that's one example that I can think of just off the top of my head. I mean, other than just a religious thing. Okay, so have you had something that cultivated love by being engaging in regularly? And then the second part of the question is, how do insights from other areas of life shed light on how we might come to find the Lord's Supper more meaningful? How do insights from other areas in our life, work, school, extracurricular activities, hobbies, sports, all that kind of stuff, other areas in our life, how do they shed light on how we might come to find the Lord's Supper more meaningful? Okay, so how can those things lead us to more meaningful communion? Okay, hope you enjoyed today. And tomorrow we'll be back in the morning. Today I had again one of those classes that I had to do, Zoom class, and so That's why I had to come on so late. But again, tomorrow we will do day six, week 4, day 6, which is who should receive the Lord's Supper. Okay. And so we will definitely see you tomorrow. Hope to see you tomorrow. You have a blessed uh, Friday evening and Friday afternoon. And there's anything we can do for you, please email me at sal@theridgeep.com. You can also send your prayers to prayer@theridgeep.com. Look us up on Facebook, The Ridge El Paso. We have a Facebook page. You can like us on Facebook, subscribe to us here on YouTube, and you'll find on our website, excuse me, at www.theridgeep.com. Excuse me. You will find the links to our Sunday services. Our Sunday services are we start at 10 in the morning via Zoom. However, if you'd like to log in or join us at 9:30, we have a what we call our fellowship via Zoom. It's the same Zoom link as the service. You just go on at 9:30 or 9:30, 9:55. We just fellowship. We see each other. We talk to each other. We say hi. We ask and see how everybody's doing. We have our coffee from our houses, and then we have service at 10. So please, there's anything we can do, send us an email, reach out to us, 915-881-4577. That phone number is linked straight to my cell number. So make sure that somebody will always answer, um, or at least get back to you as quickly as we can. And so you all have a great day and God bless.